Well, hey, it's me, Mr. Jason, the Missionary Prop Guy. I'm enjoying this beautiful fall day. You know, the other day I was thinking about it, and there's one of three ways you can tell when it's the season of fall. First, you got the beautiful changing of the fall leaves. Then you've got the unexpected autumn breeze, and then the tumbleweed. Yeah, that's right, you heard me. I did say tumbleweed, and if you live in the West or in the Midwest like I do now, you know exactly what I'm talking about. However, I grew up in South Florida and didn't know anything about tumbleweed except for what I saw in cartoons and Old West films. You know the ones I'm talking about, the ones of the mandatory tumbleweed blowing across the prairie to prove that no one's lived there for a long time. Well, when I was in high school, I had an opportunity to see my first tumbleweed when we went out west, and I was so excited until I realized it's exactly what it says. It's a bunch of weeds that are tumbling across the prairie. Can you imagine my excitement and surprise when I moved here to Indiana about 20 years ago and found we have our own version of tumbleweeds? I call them Indiana tumbleweeds. They're actually known as pinwheels. They're a weed that grows up in the grass that looks kind of like what you'd expect to find in Indiana, little things of wheat. They grow up, they sprout like this, and then they kind of shrivel up and die. And then what happens to them? Well, they get disconnected from their roots and they blow away. From what I understand, they're not really good for much. I mean, you can feed them to animals before they shrivel up and die. But other than that, they get stuck in places and they can cause a fire because they're kind of like dry kindling. You can find them everywhere. I have to say that one of their favorite places seems to be in my garage. I don't know if it's a local hangout or what it is. But it kind of got me thinking about how the Bible talks a lot about things that are driven by the wind and tossed. Of course, you have your obvious boats and things like that. But God's word mentions how that we are to be faithful and strong and true, and we're not to be wavering like a wave that's kind of going back and forth. Or when it comes to our faith, we're not to be carried away by every wind of faith or doctrine that exists. Something to think about as you take your missions to the top when you learn to use a prop.